I discriminate, you discriminate, everybody discriminates. Of course, most of us aren't actively racist or sexist, but discrimination isn't only about racism or sexism or things like that that are, actively causing harm and intentionally causing harm. Discrimination is something a lot more biological. It's something that is deeply rooted in our psychology and that most of the time we can't even control, no matter how liberal or progressive you are. Even being anti-racist might be a type of discrimination against people of color. Stick with me. You know the basics. Around 50,000 years ago, survival meant sticking to your tribe, to your family, to your whatever. So every single time you saw someone who wasn't from your tribe or from your family, you got pretty scared. So humans naturally evolved a sort of logical paradigm of saying that people that are like me are safe and people that are not like me are dangerous. Fast forward to today, we're still using the same ancient, flawed logic. That's exactly why you would feel uncomfortable if you were to be in a room with people that do not speak your language or that speak a language that you don't speak, or you would feel enamored by a person that is cheering for the same football team. Same logic. And the thing that's kind of hard to admit is that things like racism, sexism, xenophobia, all of these prejudices that have evolved biologically, I guess, aren't just, biological accidents. They're things that have been used as strategies. They're very strategic. History is ridden with elites dividing people into classes, by race, by gender, by sexuality, by I don't know, because they threaten what they are. A white person feels the need to discriminate against a black person because in a way they feel threatened as a white person. They feel as if, because the skin color is different, it somehow threatens their existence. Even today, especially politicians, I was going to say people like politicians, but especially politicians, win elections by, pointing the finger at immigrants or minorities and labeling them as the problem. Why? Because scared people are, usually easier to convince and manipulate. Also, remember what Donald Trump was pointing at when he got shot in the ear? Yeah, just a reminder. Discrimination isn't just a biological mishap. It's a political tool. It has become a political tool, and it works. And that's the worst part. But here's the kicker. Anti-racism, at least from what I've noticed, is another form of discrimination against people of color. But why do I say that? When you look at people through the lens of, they're oppressed, they've suffered so much, they need my pity, mine specifically, you're not treating them as equals, because pitying people it's only going to be putting you above them. You're not actually, taking them out of the metaphorical cage. You're putting them in a softer, more pastry-like cage. Maybe this can help as seeing them as strong and resistant and, more worthy of equality than other people might think they are. But at the end of the day, you're seeing them as inferior. That's it. An anti-racist will see a black person hop on the same bus as they are on and immediately notice their race and think to themselves, this person is oppressed, they're suffering, and they need my pity. That's not equality, right? The dream is to live in a world where a bus is filled with black people, Indian people, white people, Chinese people, Japanese people, whatever, all nationalities, all races, and whenever a new race hops on, the first thing people notice is their watch, or a bracelet, or the brand of shoes. They don't immediately hop on to the bus and everybody's thinking, oh look, a black person. And need I mention that anti-racism can be just as self-gratifying and racist as regular racism. Let's say you're really anti-racist, and you meet a Roma, a gypsy, that happens to just kind of piss you off. In your head, you won't be saying, "Oh, what an asshole." You'll probably be thinking something along the lines of, "Fuck, not only are you a minority and I respect you, but you're also a fucking asshole." That's kind of racist. There's this very interesting thing called benevolent discrimination. It's masked as kindness, but ultimately degenerates into some of the worst things discrimination has to offer in general. Because the pity you feel, the unjustified admiration you feel for a certain race just because they suffered, turns into something much uglier. It turns into you seeing yourself, your race, your society, your nationality, your gender, your sexuality as superior, so therefore you pity everyone who doesn't share what you have. And that turns into a feeling of superiority, and that turns into a hierarchy. And that is discrimination at its finest. But let's make this concrete. A teacher gives higher grades to a minority student to encourage them. A company hires a black female just to tick a diversity box. Somebody over-explains and over-explains and over-explains to an immigrant because in their head, they're secretly thinking that that immigrant couldn't possibly understand. All of these acts wear the mask of kindness, but underneath the surface, they all send a very simple message. I don't see you as the same as me. I think that you are inferior. I don't consider you an equal. You are fragile, and you are somebody that needs my help. The thing about pity is that it makes you feel superior, right? You are so kind and generous and morally superior, right? But superiority is superiority. You can't change that. It's superiority regardless if it comes from like hate or helping. And that's why discrimination as a problem is such a pain in the ass. Because it doesn't like disappear once you change your mindset. There's multiple phases to it. It fucking mutates within the human brain. It's like a pathology. It starts from like pure hatred, then you like evolve a little bit and maybe transition into stereotypes, and then it goes into pity. And you know, you arrive at that like pity stage when you see a black person and say, okay, I'm obliged to treat this person with more respect because they are inferior to me. You are actually, you know, fucking thinking this. And instead of fighting against discrimination, ending it, we're only reinforcing it. So why do we discriminate? Because it's human instinct. It's wired into politics. It's wired into our biology. And it's wired into our attempts to try not to discriminate even. But here's the good news. That if we can recognize these patterns, it means that we can break them. Because we, the human race at least, is not a victim of biology or whatever the fuck, irrationality. We can change. And instead of seeing people as inferior because we pity them and they need our pity, or as threats because they're like so different and I hate minorities, right? We can see them as equal. So to end off, ask yourself, is pity just another form of discrimination? Or is it a necessary form of compassion? Be brutally honest and leave your answer down in the comments. I'll be reading. So I'll see you later. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you later, and smarter and stronger, and maybe, if you can, we will see each other less discriminatory than ever.